All right, surprising amount of requests for me to talk about this one. I feel like this movie's kind of hit some sort of not fandom divide, not fandom war, but just kind of culture war in general. It's like you either like this movie in which you're team Chris Pratt or you don't in which you're team Hollywood. And that sucks. I don't want to. You know why I talk about trivial entertainment and not religion and politics? Because it's trivial entertainment, not religion and politics. But I guess entertainment's become religion and politics. So here we go. Let's talk religion and politics, I guess. So The Tomorrow War stars Chris Pratt, and it's a movie that the concept is amazing. When I explain it here, when you hear it explained elsewhere, you're like, that's kind of genius. I want to see it. Chris Pratt's an ex-military guy. He's a science teacher now. He's living that suburban family life, you know, with all the houses lined up together in a cul-de-sac and the the sprinkler. Then on national television, a platoon of soldiers from the future show up through time, and they're like, hey, we're losing this war against alien monsters, so we need more soldiers. So we're gonna pull soldiers from all of you in this time, in our past, because if we fail, you don't have a future. So it only makes sense. But when you're going about time travel and something like this, you can go about it a few different ways. One, there's one linear timeline. The future soldiers are our future. We are their past. If you change something in the past, it alters the future. Like Back to the Future and Marty McFly disappearing because his parents weren't gonna meet. Or again, there's one timeline, but you can't alter anything. Whatever happened, happened. If you go to the past and do something, that's something that you did always happened and you always went to the past. It's immutable, irredeemable, unalterable, kind of like how Daniel Faraday in Lost broke it down. Or Legacy of Kain. Another Legacy of Kain reference. You know I love Legacy of Kain. Or, and this is the one the movie actually does from where I'm coming from and how I'm seeing it. People in the future can come to the past and alter the past, but it doesn't alter that timeline that those people from the future know is their present. You can't just, oh, I want to win the lottery, so I'm going to go back in time and give myself winning lotto tickets. No, you just create an alternate timeline where there's a you who got winning lotto tickets, but your life remains unchanged because now it's two different timelines. So both timelines exist. At that point, our present isn't necessarily the future's past when it comes to these soldiers fighting this war, which actually I really like. Like, I like it in concept in this movie. A lot of things in this movie I like in concept. I don't think this movie really sticks the landing all the time, but that's a great concept. And the reason I think it's a great concept for this movie is that's kind of messed up. It's very selfish. In the future, they're running low on soldiers because these monsters are just tearing them up. And then they come to the past, they're like, hey, we need you to fight because we're your future, though not necessarily. And they just kind of wreck our present and our path, our timeline, because they need more soldiers and millions of people die for their future war. They're just using us as cannon fodder. It's kind of messed up. That's why that's why they have this rule where you don't fight in the future war, you don't fight in the tomorrow war unless you're dead by that time. The reason they pitch is, well, a paradox will happen, but if you're going on this concept of how this movie's dealing with time, I think it's just to make themselves feel better. It's like, well, they were gonna die anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Again, great concept, but I don't think the movie really stuck the landing in illustrating that to the audience. And sometimes this movie looks like it has a big budget. It's like $200 million movie, and sometimes you're like, that is a $200 million movie, all right? Then other times you're like, where did that budget go? Because that's some pretty shoddy CGI. Did it go to the Marvel star? You got an MCU star in this movie? Yeah, they're expensive. MCU stars, they are expensive. When you first meet the monsters, I thought the intro to the monsters was top notch. They're in this really dark, dreary building and they look up and this monster's there and it looks down at them and it's all super pale on the dark background. It's all when you first meet them, I was like, it's like the monsters from A Quiet Place had the head of Asmodan from Diablo 3. Pretty terrifying looking stuff. And then they have these tendrils that shoot spikes. You're like, I get that they have a function. They start looking goofy. And after that monster introduction, it's like the CGI for the monsters got worse and worse as the movie went on. Then by the end, I'm like, that's a lot of just CGI waves of monsters. I suppose when it had that survival horror tone, I loved it. And then when it's just waves of CGI monsters, I was like, I'm kind of over it. You can have great action movie, but still have survival horror tone. Aliens, I thought nailed it. But that's one of the greatest action movies of all time, so I'm not expecting it to be that caliber. I'm just illustrating that you can do it. It doesn't have to just be waves of CGI monsters that start boring you. And that brings me to the comic relief in this movie. Some of it works, some of it was just really awkward. With one character in particular who felt like he was plucked from a comedy movie and plopped into this movie, which is something I throw out there and people say, oh, people deflect with humor and intense situations, and that is true. Let's say we had the movie Aliens and Jim Carrey as Ace Ventura was in Aliens. That wouldn't really mix. It would be too much comedy. But Bill Paxton in Aliens I thought did work, you know? So at a point you can go too far. And in a world of different kinds of comic relief, and maybe that's part of the problem because they couldn't decide what kind of comic relief they wanted. You have J.K. Simmons and his bitter boomer style of comic relief. I felt it did work. Also, he plays Chris Pratt's father, and there is a family dynamic in this movie that's a big part of the movie. There were some surprising moments of heart in this movie with Chris Pratt, and I do appreciate that because I like Chris Pratt. But I was surprised that he wasn't the comic relief in the movie. He actually has a couple lines. I was like, it's kind of comic relief, but it just sounds like a real conversation. But as for the movie, where everything that I liked was in concept and on paper, but when you watch it, it just kind of comes across as a generic sci-fi action movie. Just one of those movies I watched and I was like, all right, that happens. There's this thought on the internet. It's like, wait, are people bagging on this movie because they don't like Chris Pratt because he might be a Republican and he's most definitely a Christian? And in a world where Hollywood is somehow perceived as the cool kids table in the high school cafeteria, all that about Chris Pratt isn't really a cool kids thing to be at that table in the cafeteria. So I can kind of see it. But again, I don't know. I don't know if that's the case, but Hollywood being the elitist dicks that they are, I could see it being the case. But in a world where the internet can speculate for days on whether or not with that situation, I will say if Hollywood or the entertainment industry personally ever hate you, that just means you're probably doing something right in life. That's just the way I see it. Benefit of the doubt, I'd be interested to see a sequel in this movie if they can refine some of the concepts, get a better script. You know, they can work it out. That's what happened with The Purge. The second Purge movie is actually a pretty good time. Also, benefit of the doubt, I watched this stone sober, and maybe this movie is a better time. But if you're drunk. Yeah, now it's the Tomorrow War is gonna be the hangover, that's for sure. All right, so the Tomorrow War, have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever you thought, comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.